guys for coming. I know there's a lot of talks this week. It is a little overwhelming. This is a double header evening. If you came to Sarah's thing earlier, hooray, you're brave to do 2 in one evening. I had to take a nap personally, I couldn't be here. But I am gonna hopefully not overload you guys with as much information as I can cram into an hour about how to kick ass at Kickstarter. It's a big topic. And there's a lot of information. I will absolutely answer questions at the end if there's something I didn't cover in enough detail that you want me to go back over. Hopefully there will be something in here for everyone. Okay, so hi, this is me. My name is Lucy. I make comics. I am an adventure cartoonist, which essentially means that I go on expeditions, like on big sailing ships or whitewater rafting expeditions or on research vessels, and I make comics about what those experiences are like. I also make comics about other stuff, and my two of my 3 Kickstarters have actually had nothing to do with being an adventure cartoonist. But just for the sort of general contextualization, this is me and this is what I do. I'm teaching the graphic storytelling third years right now. Not teaching, but cheerleading for the final week of their current projects. And I was here again 2 years ago, and I had a great time, so I'm really excited to be back. And here are some reasons you should trust me, right? Because who am I? I don't know. I'm some lady you've just met. But I have done this before, both talking with my mouth and also running Kickstarters, kind of a lot in both cases. And here are the 3 campaigns I have run to date, just as a really quick rundown. 2 of them were for graphic novels that were like proper books with spines. So my first Kickstarter was actually for a smaller comic, like a mini comic. But this was my first proper book in 2016. It's a memoir about the time that I spent working on big tall ships, old school sailing vessels. And this one, which is just coming out like this month, I just started shipping rewards to backers yesterday. And by me, I mean a company in Indiana that's doing it for me, which we'll talk about as well. And this is a book about overcoming creative self-doubt and imposter syndrome. So if you struggle with thinking that you are not good enough to be an artist, or you're a poser and everyone's going to find you out and it's all hopeless, this is probably a helpful text for you. So out of the 3 campaigns that I did, this was my first one. I was saying before we got started on the talk that I launched this campaign when I was a senior in college. I had written a 36-page comic and drawn, and I wanted to publish it. So I tried to raise, you can't really read it on here because the screen is very small, but I tried to raise $1,200 and ended up raising nearly $12,000. So it was a really unexpected, huge success. And it was the thing that gave me the courage to launch out of college into a full-time freelance career. So this is what I've been doing ever since then, which was 5 or 6 years ago, I think. So now the next campaign, I was setting out to do something a little more audacious. The goal was $15,000, but again, raised $43,000, so considerably more. And then the last one, which just happened recently, $55,000. So you can see there's a trend here, right? However, Kickstarter is not a magic money hole. This is a very important thing to understand, because I think a lot of folks look at campaigns and all you see when you see a successful campaign is the success. You see the money, you see the backers, you see the comments, you see the press. And hopefully what this talk is going to do is help you understand some of where that success comes from. So there are some caveats here, right? This first campaign happened, I forgot I have a laser pointer on here. The power. The first campaign didn't really get funded because I had a lot of fans. What I did have was a community of friends who were really tight-knit and really invested in helping me. The campaign also, comparatively speaking, had a very low goal, and we'll talk a little bit about that down the line. But that first campaign largely was funded by community friends of mine who were part of the social dance scene. I did a lot of swing dance and blues dance in Portland, and all of my dancer friends were really excited that I had this project that they wanted to support. Same goes for family, classmates, teachers, people who were on my team, even if they hadn't heard of me like some famous cartoonist. So there were about 2 years between that first campaign and the second campaign, and some things happened in there. Likewise, there were 2 or 3 years between the second campaign and the third campaign. Some things happened in there. Here are those things. So Between the first and the second, I tabled at 22 different comics events across the US and Canada and in the UK. I posted lots of stuff on social media. I started to really ramp up having a following online and sharing lots and lots of process stuff. I didn't get a lot of followers right away, but I was really consistent about welcoming people into my process and showing them what I was up to. I got really involved in the Portland comics community. I live in Portland, Oregon. Didn't say that. And I did a lot of freelance work. So I was also working with clients, developing relationships with people, building my status as a cartoonist, right? Between the second and the third one, I tabled at 15 more conventions. So I met even more people. I put out more little individual mini comics. I didn't really mention that here, but I was drawing additional comics in between these projects and sharing them for free online. Giving things away for free online is kind of my business model. Most of my comics I just put up for people to read. The Kickstarter is something that kind of comes down the line. And if you want to hear me ramble more about that, my first talk, which is recorded and it's online, and I can link to it if you guys are curious, I talk a lot about gratitude economies, which is how that system works, where you give something away for free. Capitalism is where you give somebody something and you say that'll be $5, and then they give you $5. A gratitude economy is where you're like, this is a comic, it's free. And people go, how lovely, a comic. And then 2 years later, you're like, hey, remember when I gave you that comic for free? I would really love it if you helped me make this book. And people are like, absolutely, you got it. And then they come and help you. That's like delayed capitalism, right? Or like friendly capitalism. So I'm a big fan of gratitude economies. I think they're great. So I was making comics, sharing them for free, blah, blah, blah. I took that first book from, the first Kickstarter happened up here. The second Kickstarter happened here, and that was my first graphic novel. So I organized a book tour. I went and met a lot of booksellers, librarians, people, like put myself out in the world. I got an agent on the back of that book because people saw it. They thought it looked very professional. And then publishers started approaching me, and I was like, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing. So I found an agent. Pro tip, it's much easier to find an agent when you already have publishers interested in your work. So doing a Kickstarter is really great for that because it is proof of concept, right? People can see that you're capable of doing the thing, and it's a lot easier for them to get behind you. I did 2 installments of the 100-Day Project, which is a drawing challenge or a creative challenge of some sort where you do a creative thing every day for 100 days. It is super fun. I highly recommend it. And it was also a really big boon for my online following because people on the internet love regularity. They love it. If you post something every day and it becomes a ritual and they become accustomed to it, it's very soothing in some way and they get very inspired by it. So whatever you're doing, if you do anything for 100 days, most people will be impressed. Even if it's like 100 days of brushing my teeth and everyone's like, oh, such dental hygiene, very well. Yeah. I also, somewhere in there, I should say the second 100-Day Project that I did became the basis for that third book. So that is just a collection of all of those comics. I spoke at a prominent festival for independent creators working on the internet. I got invited to give a talk, and that was to about 800 people, and those folks were very connected to crowdfunding circles, a lot of people there from Kickstarter, Patreon, other funding platforms, and a lot of people who weren't in comics but were really interested in comics, which is really key. And then, of course, more social media stuff all the time, forever and ever. So what I'm trying to say is that the big success that you see, right, usually starts way back in the past. And all of the things that we're going to talk about for successful crowdfunding generally don't have to do with things that you do during the campaign. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do when you're running a Kickstarter, communicating to everyone what's going on, posting updates, talking to backers, advertising. But really, I think most of the work happens before you hit launch, because a hotly anticipated Kickstarter is going to fund quickly. People are going to be talking about it. They're going to be excited. There's a lot that makes it easier. All of this is to say that crowdfunding is primarily built on relationships, and so is the rest of the internet. In fact, most of your life is built on relationships. It is important to remember this because we often get sucked into the idea that artists are meant to be these sort of lone, romantic, tortured souls, never seeing another human being for weeks at a time, and like it's gauche to talk about your work on social media, and like F that. It's very important that you make friends with people because success is going to come from those relationships. I just saw a great talk by a guy named Gary Chow who defined it as saying success is a function of access to networks, which I think is a really smart way of putting it, right? Your success is directly proportional to how many people you know and how connected they feel to you. Because if you're a tortured artist and you never tell anybody about your work and you launch your Kickstarter and you don't post about it on social media, guess what's going to happen to your Kickstarter? Not a lot. So part of this is a concept that I've talked to my students about a lot, and most of them aren't here because they have a deadline, so that's great. They're not going to hear me repeating myself, is to conceptualize your career as being on a ladder, right? You are climbing up the ladder, and a lot of the time when people start out, they think about trying to reach the people who are at the top of the ladder. You decide that you want to be friends with the best of the best. You know, you're like, Glenn Keane is going to be my pal, and it's going to be great, and then I will have made it as an animator. Or like in comics, you know, maybe it's like, oh, I'm going to be friends with Alison Bechdel, and it's going to be the best. But the problem is that those people got started a lot earlier than you did, and they have a lot of folks vying for their time and attention. And a far more reasonable and probably rewarding thing to do is to make friends with the people who are across the ladder from you. Look for the folks who are maybe like 3 rungs within where you are. Absolutely make friends with famous people, sure, that's great. But in terms of what you can actually do for one another, the communities that you can form that are going to sustain you, lateral is the way to go. Make friends with people across the ladder. And all of this comes down to dealing with communication. So communicating interpersonally, right? Maintaining healthy relationships. Didn't think this was going to be a relationship counseling session, but guess what? It is. Talk to your partners. Talk to your friends, talk to people on the internet, be genuine with them. This is the thing that is going to spell success for your campaign. You also need to know how to talk to your backers, especially, and we will get into this at the end of the talk, when things go horribly, horribly wrong, which does happen. I feel like we hear more about Kickstarters that go horribly wrong than Kickstarters that go horribly right. This is Gary Chow again from his talk. He describes this as saying that networks, right, your community of people, networks form around signals. So here's you, here's your fabulous signal. Whatever you're putting out into the world that you are passionate about, people are going to flock to that. They're going to come and get excited about the things that you're excited about. And his edict was become routers for each other, which I really like, right? Like a wireless antenna. Help amplify the signals of people in your network that you care about. It's a lot harder to plug a campaign for somebody that you don't really care about. But if you've ever been, I don't know, at a convention or something, and your friend is there and they have a new comic, but they're feeling kind of shy, and someone comes up and says, oh, what's this? And your friend goes, oh, it's nothing, I don't know, I was just working on this thing. It's super easy for you to pick it up and be like, are you kidding? This is the greatest work of graphic fiction in all time. And then you like sell them on it, and it's very easy. So rely on that, right? Like pay it forward, help your friends, help other people, and they will help you. So I mentioned earlier that Kickstarter has a number of outreach leads for their various departments. This is from Clarissa Redwine, who's the technology and hardware outreach specialist. So for all the projects that launch that have to do with hardware and manufacturing, she is in charge of that. And I just saw her give a brief talk, and she shared this lovely distilled essence of what makes a good Kickstarter project. It is not complicated. I know everything that I'm going to say today makes it sound really complicated, and it is, but also it's not very complicated. I want to make this thing. I want you to join me as I make this thing. I would like to make this thing because I love it. Here is how I plan to make this thing. That's it. Doesn't have to be complicated. So if you have a project that you are burning up inside, trying to get out into the world, just think about these questions or these statements rather, as you are putting together your project description, as you're planning your rewards, as you're writing your video, all of that stuff. It's a really helpful, easy framework. There's another very wise person named Creighton Berman who taught a class on manufacturing design Kickstarters for several years in the US, in Chicago. And he actually has a little zine, which I even have right here. It's called Getting Stuff Out of Your Head and Into the World. It's very good. I'll leave this up here and you guys can look through it later. But he has distilled a lot of really smart stuff in here. And one of the things that I straight up stole from him is this trifecta of characteristics to do with whether your project is a good idea. So you want it to be desirable, which means that when you think about it, you feel a stirring somewhere deep and you get kind of tingly and you're like, oh, this is going to be fun. And if you tell other people about it, likewise, they might say, wow, that's a really cool idea. Oh my gosh, I would love to see that happen. It needs to be feasible. So that generally means like your personal ability to complete the project, right? If you want to do an entire graphic novel, have you ever drawn comics before in your life? Maybe helpful to have done that a little bit before you start. And then viable is where you talk about money, right? What are you going to need to have in place in order to make this campaign happen? And obviously some of that is money, right? You need money from other people. But do you have the access to networks that you would need to find a printer, to figure out production and distribution and advertising, all of that stuff? And there's Creighton's Twitter handle and Instagram right there. All of these people that I've shared are very professional, and so they have the same Twitter and Instagram handle, which is a smart move. Also, in every instance, it's just their full name, which is also very important. Okay, here we go. We're just like plowing through all of this. Video. You got to make a video. The nice thing about being at animation school is that there are a lot of nice cameras here and lots of people who actually know how to film things with those cameras and people who will even act in your video. You guys have access to an amazing resource here. So if you plan to launch a Kickstarter, maybe film the video for it before you graduate. That would be useful. Here are some things that I see people do on video that I think are not great, that undersell your project. Do not skimp on sound quality. A lot of the time it sounds like someone's talking to you through a paper bag in a closet in an echo chamber, and it's awful. Try to find a decent mic, or if you can't find a decent mic, be in a space that's not super echoey. Just make a little bit of an extra effort to have something that sounds professional. Personality is greater than perfection. That being said, you don't have to have ideal production values. One of the things that I think really helped my very first campaign, and this is a sad but true lucky coincidence, the gentleman I was dating at the time was a film nut, and he rented a stupid amount of film equipment because he saw this as an opportunity to like experiment with all of this stuff that he had never tried before. And so the video that he produced was totally overkill for the thing that I was trying to sell. It was like, I wanted to make this 36-page comic. He made this like 3.5-minute short film extravaganza. We can watch all the videos for the Kickstarters. I opted not to put them in here because you're already getting a lot of my talking face, and I didn't want to put more of my talking face in here. But if you guys are curious, we can watch them afterwards and you can get a sense for like how I presented it. But many people, okay, yes, we'll do that. They're really fun. I'm very proud of them. The last one has animation in it, which is kind of scary actually, because you guys are all animators, so like, sorry, it's not gonna be very good. No, my friend Patrick did it, and it's great. But we animated the little demon character and like did a live action animated thing, and it turned out better than I could have hoped. But the people who backed that first campaign, who were strangers, who I did not know, who weren't part of my network, all of them said, wow, you know, I mean, I saw this campaign, but then I watched your video and was like, wow, this lady takes her shit seriously. Like, this is, you used like a rail in this, you know, there's like all these slow pans and zooms, and the color correction is great, and you're creating a sense of quality, right? If you care about your video, then people are gonna realize that you care about your project. So think about it as a form of advertising. That being said, right, the perfection thing, if you are excited about your project, if you are upbeat, if you're welcoming, that is going to count for a lot more. You can have a flawlessly produced video that is soulless. Right? And you just stand there going, this is my project, and like you very much, and it's awful. You want to keep it short and sweet? Under 3 minutes, really. There's project videos that go on, and like you just don't really, you don't have to be that complicated. Remember those 4 lines, 5 lines that Clarissa wrote? That's it. That's all you got to have up there. You don't need to describe to people what Kickstarter is anymore, which is great. My first video, I had to do a little bit of that because Kickstarter was fairly new. That was 2012, so it was like kind of up and coming. You can use your laptop like a teleprompter. This is very helpful if you do not want to remember the whole script for your Kickstarter. Just be sure to like stack it somewhere so that it's in an eyesight with where you're sitting, right? And you can have different slides that a friend can tab through for you. Try to make sure that it's not really obvious that you're like reading with your eyes while you're filming. But as someone who gets nervous a lot of the time in situations like that, I've found it really helpful to have just make the text really big. There's your laptop, digital teleprompter. Very easy. Also, it's nice to have music, and there is a lot of free music out in the world. You probably have people here who compose music who could like do that stuff for you, but you can go hunting for Creative Commons licensed music and find some really decent stuff, and that way you can have music for your film that is not going to get you in trouble for having used something that is copyrighted. And of course, recruit your friends, right? You have a network, use them. It is a lot easier to film a video with someone else pushing play and pause and moving your laptop and helping with lighting and whatever. Even if you do a really simple, just your iPhone stacked on top of a pile of books thing, having a friend there is really nice. And the whole goal of this is to create in people a desire to buy. So this means you're going to be clear and concise and confident. You're not begging for people's help. You're not saying, oh, take pity on me, a poor wastrel who cannot rub 2 pennies to make a comic together. Like, that's not fun. No one wants to be invited to that party. Everyone wants to be invited to the party where you're saying, I am going to do this. I want you to join me. It's way better than saying, I would really like to do this, but I can't yet. Can you please help? Blah, blah, blah. So you want to gather your allies, right? The people who are making this thing happen with you, they are customers, yes, and they are benefactors, yes, but they're mostly allies. They're across the ladder, right? The best campaigns, I think, create a relationship laterally, where you are bringing people inside the process and you're saying, we are on the same playing field, you and I. We can offer each other something and we can do it together and we'll be better for it. And that's a really appealing sell to people, far more than, and admittedly, I say this knowing that there are lots of campaigns out there for stuff, right? There's campaigns for like gravity blankets that raise millions of dollars, or like smartwatches that really take off. And sure, in those instances, people are saying, wow, I want a gravity blanket, buy. Or they're getting a lot of targeted Facebook advertising, and that is telling them to do that, so they do that. That's not what we are in the business of doing. And really, I don't think that's what Kickstarter is for either. I am firmly of the opinion that it is for creative projects, and a lot of the time, creative means that like you've got to have some skin in the game. You have to care about what you're putting out there. Okay, I'm gonna pause to drink some water because this is a lot of talking and we're just going through it. So a couple things about manufacturing. I make my own books. I like doing it. That is to say, I don't make them all myself by hand, but I, like having control over the process of design and production. So there are 2 basic ways to think about going about a Kickstarter campaign if you are making a thing, an object. So I apologize those of you who might be making a film, because that's a slightly different thing, or a game, or a whatever. But coming at this from a book's perspective, or another kind of thing, an art thing perspective, you can have a limited edition campaign, which is characterized by being self-contained, right? The project is designed to kind of begin and end on Kickstarter. The budget zeroes out by the end, or maybe leaves you with a little bit of profit, but like mostly it's designed to pay for itself, pay for the shipping, pay for the fulfillment, and then you're done. There's not like extra money left over. You're probably going to have more prestige or handmade rewards, right? Special, one-of-a-kind things. The item itself that you're kickstarting might be fancier. It might be something that you're going to say, there's only 100 of these. And Kickstarter has been doing an interesting thing where they launch these little mini challenges. So they did one last January that was called Make 100. And they invited a bunch of people to launch projects making only 100 of a thing. So it was a challenge to just like make 100 of your comic book, and there are only 100. You can't make stretch goals. You can't, increase your print run. It's like once they're gone, they're gone. So there's this sort of scarcity economy is the term for that, where people are excited to jump on board. Their desire to buy is impacted by the fact that there's only 100 and they might be gone, and oh my God. So that's, you have your thing, you have 3 thing, 3 people, thing, people, thing, people, thing, people, the end. You're done. The campaign is, in essence, kind of a performance piece, right? You are doing it as a sort of production-based stunt. It does, however, build community. There's nothing like going through the course of running a Kickstarter, which is a very emotional time, to connect you to people who are invested in your work. And I have found that people who pledged to that very first Kickstarter in 2012 have pledged to the following one, and the following one, and they'll probably pledge to the one after that, because audiences are kind of cumulative in that way, and people are investing not just in the product that you're selling, and maybe that's the difference, right, between a gravity blanket and a graphic novel or a film or whatever that you pour your heart and soul into, is that that project invests people in you and the product, not just a gravity blanket. If they say, like, from the creators of the people who made you the gravity blanket, like, maybe you'd care, but probably not. Okay, mass market production, which is more the direction that I have trended, looks a little bit more like this. You have a scalable project, right? For me, I generally have a target goal of how many books I would like to sell through a Kickstarter, but it is entirely flexible. If I end up getting way more backers than I anticipated, it is feasible for me to print more books. The funds that you raise are designed to cover most of the production, like all of the production costs, but they're also going to leave you with stock at the end, and you might even have some extra funding. This means that the basic thing that you're going to make, the book that you're going to make, hopefully needs to be mass producible. It doesn't mean that you can't have special rewards. You can have fancy editions, you can have book plates, you can have whatever, but mostly it is a good idea to have something that will scale easily. This also makes more sense for book production because there are two options, more or less, digital printing and offset printing. Digital is generally better for short runs, so fewer numbers of books. Offset printing gets cheaper the more books you print. So it's very expensive at the beginning, but as you scale up, usually in integers of like 500 to 1,000 copies, things get much cheaper. So it could be the same price to print 500 books as 3,000 books. It's pretty significant, which is important for a Kickstarter because it means that past that funding point, you know, if you raise enough to print 500 books and that's your goal, but you could print 2,000 books for $400 more, everything you raise above that goal automatically starts to turn into profit, which is neat. I mean, I say profit with like very heavy quotation marks because if this has taught me anything, it's that mostly the money that you are going to make will go straight back into promoting and producing the thing. And when you're done with that thing, it's going to go into promoting and producing the next thing. Like, at no point have I walked away from a Kickstarter with a fat stack of cash and been like, ha ha, going off to lie in my bathtub full of money. So this is more of an investment. You are having people buy into producing a run of stock that you are hopefully going to sell for many years. For this last campaign that I just did, I sold probably about 1,200 copies of the book, and I printed probably about 4,000. So I have a large number left over to sell to people through various avenues. And surprisingly, I think I will get through them, which is pretty cool. You also want to budget for things that come after the campaign. So I'll show you guys down the line. I've got some budgeting spreadsheets. Very exciting. I'm very in spreadsheet land right now, so if I talk too much about that stuff, just like raise a hand and be like, Lucy, stop! We don't want to hear about it. Or if you do, cheer and scream and go wild. But having a budget that covers things that happen after the campaign is over can be really useful. And I made a budget spreadsheet for my current Kickstarter that I made public for all of my backers to look at. It's actually public for everyone. You guys can go look at it too. But the point of it is to show people this is where all the money goes, because like, $55,000 is a lot of money. That's like an annual salary for somebody. And I need people to understand that I'm not walking away with all that cash, but I also think it's helpful for other people trying to design their own campaigns. So in this case, the campaign is less a performance piece and more of a pre-sale engine, and it's kind of an advertising campaign. What's going to happen with this most recent book of mine is Kickstarter backers are getting their books starting like this week, which is cool. But the book is going to have a commercial release. I'm going to send it out to bookstores and libraries and comic shops and all of that. But that's not happening until June. So my fiendish scheme is that as these 1,200 people get their books over the next couple of months, they will begin reading them, talking about them, recommending them to friends, posting about them on social media, blah, 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 blah. So that by the time bookstores need to order it, there will be buzz. And I won't have had to do a bunch of like schlocky marketing stuff in order to get it. So that's my cunning scheme. I'll check back with you in June and let you know how that goes, but hopefully well. All right, campaign design. This is like the nuts and bolts of how to actually lay out your whole shtick. I don't trust myself not to knock my water bottle over because it's happened before during talks. Okay, when you are building a budget, get a quote. That means contacting the manufacturer or your shipping contact or like the person who's going to do your fulfillment to send all your packages to your backers. Get in touch with them ahead of time and get a quote for how much it is going to cost. Quote for a couple of different scenarios, right? Say, okay, if I hit my goal and I sell all 500 of my books, how much will that cost? If the campaign is massively successful and I suddenly have to ship 2,000 books, how expensive will that be? Just keep track of these numbers and know that, and again, the spreadsheet will probably help with this. Everything counts, right? I tried to account for every cost. I had some friends who did this with a Kickstarter once, and they included the cost of taking themselves out for a nice dinner after the Kickstarter ended and was successful, which was like $50, you know? But I really appreciated that they included that because cartoonists especially, I think, we have a tendency to say like, oh, well, I can get by on not very much. Like, it's fine. I don't need fancy things like clothes or a house. And so we kind of make do with like the barest minimum. And you don't have to do that. Your time is worth money. One of the most validating things about running a Kickstarter is being given tangible financial proof that people care about your work. And it may be people that you don't expect, right? Sure, your mom is going to give you 20 bucks and that'll be nice. But there were people who pledged to my first campaign who I didn't really think knew me that well. And indeed, they didn't know me that well. They just saw this thing and were like, that's cool. I want to support that young upstart Lucy Bellwood. And so they gave me money. And it was very meaningful. And I think will probably be meaningful for all of you. And I would advise, I'm coming at this from a very like big campaign kind of perspective, but Gary Chow runs a class in New York at the School of Visual Arts with Christina Shi, and they teach a class that is one of their final projects that their students do is they have to design, launch, and produce a $1,000 Kickstarter, which I think is a great project. So one of the things that went really well about that first campaign was that goal, like $1,200 is actually pretty manageable. If somebody gives you $100, you are well on your way to making that goal. And people love backing a winner. Again, your allies, right? People love piling on a train that's doing super well. If I had decided that that campaign was going to be $15,000 and I was a new unknown person, $100 doesn't really feel like you're pushing the needle forward. You want people to be able to feel like they can be involved in the process. So anyway, I'm tangenting here, but quoting for all of the costs is important so that you can then figure out what your absolute minimum goal is going to be. And I say this because it's really helpful to let people feel like they can have an impact on what's going on, and also just like kind of plan for the worst case scenario. Like, don't assume that your Kickstarter is going to blow up. You could do everything that I tell you to do in this talk, and it could still be a disaster. I will not guarantee that doing these things is going to give you success because there are lots of Kickstarters out there. But I do think the things I'm telling you will probably give you a fighting chance. Again, let your allies impact your success. I already said that one. Don't go overboard with designing rewards. This is maybe not so much of a problem. Well, no, it's probably still a problem. I have personally outgrown the desire to make 1 million Kickstarter extras and say, like, everyone gets a badge and a pin, and you get a book, and you get a toy, and you get a hat, and, like, everybody gets stuff. That is tempting because you want to give people more stuff. You like those people, but every additional thing you produce adds to your cost, your effort, all of it. It's exhausting. So kind of scale it down. I'm going to show you a video of my friend Dave Malky, who had a campaign where everything that could have possibly gone wrong went wrong, and he had so many rewards watching these videos. I'm just like, one of the rewards was you got a special like laser engraved numbered edition box set of the game he had produced that had been looked at by a goat. And there's a video of him going to a goat farm to like show these boxes to these goats. It was like 3 boxes, not very expensive. You know, anyway, I do admit that that's a really great gag, but you also want to give people permission to go big. One of the things that first-time Kickstarter people often don't assume is that someone will want to give them a lot of money. Lots of the time, people don't know that they can give you a lot of money unless you give them permission to. Often, I have run crowdfunding efforts, and people have said, Lucy, there's no $500 reward. And I'm like, well, you could just type in $500 in the pledge. And they're like, no, I want a reward. It's not that they want the stuff, they just want the button that says, give me $500. So, like, make a $500 tier. I don't know, like, someone gave me $300 that first campaign, and I did not know them, and I wrote them a thank you note. And they wrote back and said, wow, that's, gosh, an actual thank you note. That's so sweet. Hey, have another $200. Person I did not know. It's very cool. The internet is great. So just, like, create the space for people to go big, right? And really important is decide what success looks like to you. This is a big question for your career in general, I think, not just for running a Kickstarter, but for lots of people, especially, I mean, this is like very prevalent in America, right? That success is making a lot of money and like having a lot of prestige and status and buying a house and having kids and I don't know, whatever. Success looks different to every single person, right? For you, maybe success is you make something and it becomes a really useful teaching aid in a local school, right? Or maybe success means that you don't have to worry about money, like, at all, ever. which is also a totally viable goal, right? The things that are popular in pop culture are not necessarily bad, but it is important to define that ahead of time because it's really easy to look at other people's campaigns and say like, oh, well, they raised $40,000 and like, I only raised $8,000. And like, what the fuck? You raised $8,000? Like, pat yourself on the back. That is no mean feat. So just ask yourself some questions when you're starting out. Ideally, just pie in the sky. Like, where would you like to end up with this project? Does this steer you towards a place that you would like to go? And this is my very poor attempt at a Rolling Stones joke, but you can't always guess what they want, which is I try to anticipate what backers are going to want from my campaign, but at the end of the day, you cannot know for sure. I went back and forth on my campaign about whether I should do hardcover books or softcover books. I ran polls on Twitter. I asked all of my friends. People had very strong opinions. And ultimately, I decided to do both because it's not actually that much more expensive. And the order numbers were 50-50. I will show you the spreadsheet. It is infuriating. Like, people were straight down the middle divided on whether they wanted hardcover or softcover. So you can't know for sure what people are going to want, but make a thing that you are passionate about, and that will hopefully help. So here you go. This is, okay, it's not right down the middle, but like, it's pretty stinking close, right? Hardcover, softcover, people wouldn't care. And actually, I guess there's a slight lead to hardcover there, but like really not by a lot. So this was my last campaign. The reward structure was really simple. I almost did not add the plush toy, but it became really apparent that people would go nuts for a plush version of the little inner demon that I conversed with the whole time. And as you can see, it ended up being really popular, right? I sold just about as many combo sets, and including people who just got the plushie, definitely more than just the book by itself. So sometimes if you find the right add-on reward, it's really helpful. Yes?
How did you go about making a plushie?
I was approached at a convention by some folks who run a plush manufacturing company. They left a postcard with me, and I was like, I'm never going to do that. But then this campaign came around, and my partner was like, hey, remember those people who came by at Emerald City Comic Con with that plush toy? And it turns out they produced, do you guys know the This Is Fine dog? Yeah. It's a very popular meme. So Casey Green is a cartoonist. He drew that dog, and he did the Kickstarter campaign to make a plush version of that dog called Question Hound, and they raised tons of money. This production company made that toy, so I knew they had worked with someone I knew and had done a good job. They also made the Fat Pony plushes for Kate Beaton, who's another cartoonist, so like I knew that they could produce quality stuff. It was a flat fee for a prototype, and then we did a little bit of revision back and forth, and then I signed off, and they made 2,000 of them. And now they are taking up a lot of space in my house and various warehouses around the country. Okay, so a lot of advertising your campaign is all about anticipation. I really enjoyed making this slide. So again, like I said, 90% of your work happens before the campaign launches. You are not doing promotion during the campaign, because at that point your hair is on fire, you're screaming, you're running around naked, you don't know what's going on anymore. Really just set yourself up for success here and do this stuff early. So complete as much of the project as you can ahead of time. Not just the Kickstarter project, but like the actual creative work. Every time I've run a campaign, the comics that I am printing have been fully drawn, totally completed. In the case of Baggy Wrinkles, the second book, they needed to be colored because we hit a stretch goal to color the book, but mostly the art is done. It is a lot easier to sell people on that proof of concept of saying, I did this, right? That's that, this part of the viable part of that tri-Venn diagram, which is make sure that you have what it takes. So you have to show people that you've got the capability to do that. Likewise, while you are completing that thing ahead of time, be sharing stuff online about the project. One of the biggest things that made this last campaign a success was that for 3.5 months prior, I had posted a new comic from this book every single day. And that meant that on day 100, when I posted the 100th comic, people were real fucking invested in that thing. And when I launched the Kickstarter the same day, everybody went straight from having spent 3.5 months caring about these characters to, hey, I can give you some money. And it worked really well. So consider sharing on social media to be kind of like an advertising campaign for what you were doing. Likewise, talk to people about it. If you are into your project, this will not be difficult. It shouldn't feel like pulling teeth. If you are a very shy, retiring person and all of this is like making you break out into a cold sweat, it may be difficult at first. But I would encourage you to practice communicating and sharing with people stuff that you care about, because if people know that it's coming, there will still be somebody, and it will drive you crazy because you will have been tweeting about it, talking about it, blogging about it, posting about it for months. And there's always going to be someone who's like, "You ran a Kickstarter? I didn't know anything about that." You're like, why do I do anything? It's very difficult, but just breathe and you'll get through it. Have all of your press materials ahead of time. You don't have to go nuts on this, but whatever you want to produce to help promote the project, make it way in advance, because trust me, you are not going to have the mental capacity to do it once the campaign is up. So that could be a press release about the project. It could be a one sheet, which is just a nice little PDF that has all the information, a couple sample images, some info about you, a link to the campaign, or even a preview site, right? Somewhere where you post all the comics or you share excerpts or a video. Anything that someone might want to know about the campaign, make that really easy to find ahead of time. If you want to approach people to do press for you, bloggers, YouTubers, other cartoonists, creators, authors, whatever, send them that stuff really far in advance. It's a really saturated market. Lots of people are getting requests like this. Again, reaching across the ladder is really helpful here. If you are going for somebody super popular who gets 18 emails every hour asking for people to plug their Kickstarter, chances are good that they're probably not going to respond to you. And really, if they don't have a stake in it, their followers probably won't care. You can tell when someone is advertising something they don't care about. So send that stuff way in advance, let people know that you value their time, and you're far more likely to get a response from them. Likewise, pick a launch date, both for your sake and for your backers' sake, and stick to it. Use it as the thing that is going to prevent you from chickening out and saying like, "Oh, I don't actually want to do this. This is too much work. Oh God, okay." And then use your wizard powers. The really cool thing is that all of you are wizards. Did you know? You are visual artists. You can do stuff that most people cannot do. So illustrating little thank you cards, right? Drawing a picture of yourself freaking out because you hit a goal, making a tiny video of you running around screaming. One of the favorite things that people have said they like about my campaigns is that I post little GIFs of me doing goofy dances when we hit certain funding milestones. And like, that's all they're in it for. I mean, I guess they want the book too, but like, people are into you sharing your creative spirit with them. So don't forget that you are special. You have special skills and you can use them for fun and profit. This is an example of one of those weird things that I did. Doing a Kickstarter is going to make you try and advertise in really weird ways because it gets boring just tweeting about it. So I made a video with my friend James.
Funny, I didn't order a mattress.
James, I'm running a Kickstarter. Did you know?
Oh my god!
We didn't end up using this video, but we had this leftover mattress box and I got really excited. But this is kind of what it feels like, is that you're knocking on everyone's door being like, hey, pay attention to me. I'm doing this thing. It's fun, but also exhausting. Anyway, do goofy stuff. Like, people like it when you do goofy stuff on the internet. It's good. So when you launch your Kickstarter, right? We're doing pretty okay here. This is going to be kind of long. You are going to deal with a basic growth curve. I'm going to show you what it looks like so you don't panic. You're going to launch. It's going to be very exciting. There is going to be a lot of action. This is going to be very cool. I mean, hopefully there's going to be a lot of action. The first day, there's always kind of a spike. Then, I mean, your line might look like this. It might even look like this. It might just flatline. Most campaigns, the maximum duration, I can't remember how long they go up to. 30 days, 60 days? I don't know. All of my campaigns have been 3 weeks. I think 3 weeks is the ideal time period because a Kickstarter that like drags on and on forever in the middle, you're just going to exhaust people hearing about it. Chances are good if you have 3 weeks, that's like 1 week for people to get really hyped about it, to have the launch happen, 1 week to make sure that you inform everybody of what's been going on, and then 1 week for all the stragglers to go, oh shit, I forgot to pledge to that Kickstarter, and then go do it. So at the end, you're also going to see a little spike like that, and then ta-da, you made it. This is consistent across almost every project. Now, sometimes your funding line is down here, right? So everything that happens after this is fine. It's gravy. You don't have to worry. Ideally, you hit your funding goal somewhere in here and you don't have to fret. But it's still really stressful to say, my Kickstarter is flatlining. It's like an episode of ER and you're like pumping the chest of your Kickstarter and it's not going anywhere. So don't panic if that's happening. I mean, keep plugging it, but just keep in mind that people will come back around. Okay, everyone take a deep breath. We're going to talk about money. I love talking about money. It's my favorite. So here are 3 ways to present money things to your backers that will hopefully make the budget a little clearer to them, or possibly just to you. It's also helpful for you to understand your budget. This is a sample of what I used for this last campaign, and this was the graphic that ran on the Kickstarter. And it also comes paired with this, which was like a breakdown of everything that was in there with the numbers. But just to give you a sense of proportionally, I'm really glad those plushies panned out, because guess what? They cost like 3 times as much as making the books. It was expensive to produce them. They were about $6 a piece to manufacture. The books, by contrast, were anywhere from like $1.50 to $4. So pretty substantial. However, the plushies retail for $25. The books retail for $15 and $20. So the profit margin there is a little higher. Here are some of the things that you might want to consider. Kickstarter and card processing vendors take fees when you use their services. There are shipping and fulfillment costs, so you need to figure out how much it's going to cost to mail packages to people, how much it's going to cost to buy envelopes and mailers, where you're going to keep your stuff. Are you going to pay someone to ship those packages for you? Very important. Having a book designer might be useful if you're not good at InDesign. Having a print broker might be useful if you need someone to be a go-between between you and a printer. And actually paying to get the books made is also important. And then because I'm in the US and taxes are garbage and we do not have a welfare state, I set aside 30% of the money that I make, because Kickstarter is taxable income. So that's something to keep in mind here. And obviously your tax rate is going to be very different from ours, but this means that the base budget for the project, like what I would need to make everything work, is 25 grand. Ideally, I would love to raise 32,500, because that would allow me to cover all of the potential expenses of what if I get a huge tax bill, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I should also point out that most of these costs are deductible expenses, so you won't be taxed on everything that you make off the Kickstarter. But I'm cautious. I like to play it safe, so I take the full 30% and just like put it in an account. So this was how that broke down, right? You can give people a textual breakdown. I'm a big believer in crediting folks who I work with, so I make sure to link to all the companies I'm using, right? That also means that if somebody else comes along and they want to make a plushie down the line, they can say, oh, Soft Stuff Creations, boop, like, what do they do? Same goes for if you are looking for book designers. Find books that you like and flip through to the thank you section, see if the author thanked their book designer, see if the book designer is credited. Those things can be very helpful for hunting people down. And then if you want to get really wild about it, this is the spreadsheet that I share with people. So this has everything. It's too pixelated to read. But you can see that I broke this down into and this says pre-campaign expenses. So I tried to go through and calculate all the money that I had spent before the Kickstarter even went live. And that was like video production and animation, because I worked with a lot of other people for this. You can do this all yourself. I am 3 campaigns deep, and I'm kind of over the DIY approach because I'm old and tired. So I hired some people to help me, and that cost me about $1,000 up front. The campaign happened, so that was very exciting, but you'll see in this section that I lost about $5,000 to campaign fees and card processing fees. So a chunk of change, right, if you raise a lot of money. So I end up with about $50,000. And then this is like all of the stuff that I've paid for so far. This is the stuff that I have paid for that doesn't have to do with the Kickstarter campaign, but still has to do with getting the book out into the world or advertising it. And then I used a service called BackerKit, who handle Kickstarter surveys and enable backers to buy add-ons. So if someone got BackerKit's really helpful if you have rewards, but you don't want to make a million reward tiers of custom combinations. They will say, hey, did you back this project and you really wanted to get 2 hardcovers, 1 plush toy, and also this other thing that you couldn't do on the campaign? Come on over to BackerKit. We can do that. They also take a fee, right? So somewhere in here is the BackerKit. There it is. BackerKit fee was like $1,000. But BackerKit profits from people who bought the book is just over $6,000. So it was definitely worth it for me. So there's my current outstanding budget right now. I've got like $5,000 to play with. But I have to store things in a warehouse, and I am paying a publicist to help me market the book. And so you can see how like the money keeps rolling through. Currently, it looks like I'm probably going to I'm actually going to be in the red. So I will end up with less money than when I started. But that does not take into account the fact that I have many, many books now. And it's a lot of fucking work to take care of all those books. So All of this is a lot of fucking work. It's exhausting. Don't be scared. Don't be scared of hard work. You're in animation school. Come on, you're not afraid of hard work. This is ridiculous. You're fine. You're fine. You're going to be fine. It's good to remember that this is going to be an undertaking, and it will test the limits of your sanity, but it will also hopefully be very rewarding. Now, real briefly, we're going to end on a high note here and talk about common pitfalls, things that go wrong. Here are a few of the horrible wrongnesses that you may encounter. These are actual things that have happened to people that I know. None of them were fun. You calculate postage rates for your campaign, and then the USPS raises the postage rate between when you plan your campaign and when you launch it. Costs you an extra $2,000 or more, depending on how big your campaign is. The Longshoremen's Union, the people who unload your books off the container ship, goes on strike the week that your shipment comes into port, and then you have a 2-month delay, and you can't do anything about it because nothing is moving in the port of San Francisco. Your fulfillment company misunderstands an email request and destroys all of your remaining stock, which means you lose lots of books and also a lot of money that you were hopefully going to make from selling those books. Also, fun fact, their terms and conditions said that they were allowed to, like, they weren't liable for that kind of loss. And so the person who lost all of their books had no recourse. It was just like that, they were gone. That was it. It was awful. Your shipment disappears down a customs sinkhole if you are bringing books in from outside the country. I don't know about here, but for me, it is almost inevitably cheaper for me to print books outside the US. I was really excited because I found a printer in Canada who was able to get me super good rates. Most of the time, people are printing overseas in China, Malaysia. That is difficult for a number of reasons. It's very cheap, but you cannot verify labor practices, and the toll on the environment is pretty huge. And communication is also sometimes a challenge. So there are a lot of reasons to do it. Personally, I am a tree-hugging hippie, and so the thought of contributing to container shipping pollution was really destroying my soul. And now I have a printer in Canada who I love. They're great. But in Europe, I'm sure there are a lot more options to get stuff printed affordably. So shop around. However, customs is a terrible nightmare, and sometimes your books just go missing, and you don't know where they are, and no one can tell you, and your backers are like, what the fuck? And you're like, I don't know. Who knows how many months that's going to take. And this is probably the worst one. Your entire print run of books arrives, and there's a printing error, and it is your fault. And you have to take all those books you just printed to the dump and pulp them, and then you have to go print more, which is extremely sad. Oh, and then of course the thing that happens, which is most important, is you attract the ire of an evil wizard. You guys are good wizards, but this is what happens when your campaign goes totally wrong. And I say this as an example of how to make this work. This is my friend Dave Malky.
Finally, it's happened. 32 tons of Machine of Death games have arrived. We had trouble leaving China. We had danger on the high seas. We had an absurd delay at U.S. Customs, but it's here now. And we have people busily taking the games out of the boxes they came in from the factory, putting them into new boxes to send to you. I cannot believe it's finally happening. I'm so happy because even though it's been tough, it's been a challenge, I really feel like we're over the hump, and from here on, it's gonna be smooth sailing.
Your troubles are just beginning. Mark my words. The Machine of Death will never see the light of day. Its knowledge is too dangerous for mankind. You think your goods are safe in this precious warehouse? There are many more troubles yet to come. I will bring fire from the heavens, a flood to put out the fire, and then an earthquake to drink up the waters, and then the ants to cover up the earthquake, and then a bunch of bees. I will stop at nothing to save humanity from the tear of this machine.
After the video, someone talk to me. What's going on? Dang it, wizard! What are you doing? We're working hard on this thing.
You fool! You don't know who you're toying with here.
Who?
The wizard!
Okay, fine, but we're trying to get the Machine of Death out right now.
Machine of Death? You think you're gonna let that pass me? No man should know when he's going to die. It's not for man to know.
There's no machine. The machine isn't real.
Ha 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 ha! It'll never be realized so long as I draw breath on this accursed rock. If this machine was loose in the world,
This machine-
it would destroy the wizard's industry.
There's no... It's just a game. It's not a real machine. We're trying to get a game out to these people. So, could you please not do what you're doing?
A game of death? What kind of game's that? Death is no game.
Ours is a game. It's called the Machine of Death, and it's a game you play with your friends. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, Wizard. You thought it was
I thought it was real.
It's a
Why-
game called Machine of Death. It's not a real Machine of Death.
Well, I thought it was a metaphor. Saying that game of life and death.
No. There has been a grave misunderstanding.
So there's a lot more of this. Dave is he's great with video. Obviously, you may not have the access to the production strategy to make a fancy wizard do fancy wizard things, but I really love this approach because throughout all of these things going horribly wrong, there are like 63 project updates for the Machine of Death game. That is many project updates. I'm at like, I don't know, it's been 9 months and I've made maybe like 10, 11, 14, but not 63. Every time something went wrong, things are going to go horribly wrong. Like, it will just happen. Something weird will take place. You'll have a delay, something will go missing, whatever, but you still have to talk about the things that go wrong. And what I loved about what Malky did is that he made these videos and like he made a joke out of it, right? He was obviously frustrated by what was happening, but when their container ship hit some kind of overheating malfunction and had to pull into emergency port, he found a shipping news article about a container ship that had been abandoned because it was on fire, and then just posted that article and was like, hey, we're not these guys. I mean, like, worse things happen at sea. So I think there's a way to talk to your backers. For example, the campaign I'm just fulfilling, 200 of my very limited edition hardcover books just weren't there when the shipment arrived. They just went missing. My warehouse doesn't know where they are. The trucking company doesn't know where they are. The printer doesn't know where they are. It's fine. Everything's fine. But I told my backers, I was like, hey, this is something that happens, right? If you write to your backer and you're like, terrible news, everything is ruined, then they're going to freak out, right? So just talk to them as you would a skittish horse and tell them that everything's going to be okay. And it's probably going to be okay. Malky did a really smart thing. I think making a joke out of stuff, including showing your game to goats, is a really cool and valuable thing to do, because then, you know, you can have some fun with it because you might as well, right? You're just like losing your mind otherwise the rest of the time. So just to bring this all back around, it's about relationships that can be formed through humor, right? It can be formed through palling around with people and making funny videos. It can be formed through connecting with your classmates and sharing your work with them and getting excited about what you're doing. But the coolest thing about Kickstarter, I think, is that it does leave you with a product, right? And making a book, I mean, I took video of me unboxing this most recent book and I do straight up cry because I'm so happy. It's like, people say it's like having a baby. I've never had a baby and I don't actually think that's a valid metaphor, but it is a very emotional and cool experience to hold something that you have manufactured with the help of hundreds or thousands of other people who have believed in that thing. And ultimately what you're left with is a big passel of humans having a really good time. This is just a fraction of the crowd that we could not fit into the photo for the closing party for my Kickstarter, this last one. We gathered everybody together for the last hour of the campaign, and there was a big countdown, and I lost the video of it, but there is like everyone counting down. We did a live stream on Kickstarter. And it was really fun, and it was great to see all these people in person. And the campaign will have repercussions through time, right? People will come up to you at conventions, they will find you, they become invested in your career after you do this thing, which is super great and really cool. And I think it's a great tool. So even though it's a ton of work, I highly recommend that you all try it. And you can keep in touch with me at these places. This is my Twitter and Instagram handle and my website. And I am really excited to see what you guys produce with yourselves and your creative projects. So thank you for listening. I know this was a ton of information, and we'll take a break and do stuff and then watch project videos and do questions, okay? Yay! Good job. That was actually an hour. I'm really impressed.